But what's really exciting me right now is food. Food's become this really exciting area. Our appreciation of restaurants, destination dining's become this whole thing, and tourism boards around the world are designing national campaigns for countries based around dining and traveling to those destinations. TV shows like Chef's Table on Netflix, big events now. IMG's Taste and Gourmet Escape, which are becoming big multi-territory events. Has pushed food now to be on a par with sport and music. So, hence why we've called this panel "Food: The Third Passion Pillar." So, it's less of the odd one out and more the new kid on the block. I couldn't help that. That was a bad pun. And to speed date, we've only got half an hour for this panel, so to speed date our way through this exciting topic, we've got a fabulous panel, which I'd like to introduce before we kick things off. And at the heart of all things culinary, of course, are the chefs, the creators. And on my immediate left here, I'm very privileged to be joined by one of the world's most renowned chefs, David Thompson. Hailing from Sydney and now living in Bangkok. David flew up to be here from Bangkok, so thank you for that. David's recognised as one of the best, if not the best Thai chefs in the world.
Let's move on, shall we?
His Nahm restaurant in Bangkok is highly regarded in the top 5 Asian restaurants on the world's 50 best list in Asia. Number 28, I think, currently moving up and down on the world's 50 best list. And David has a restaurant here in Singapore. If you haven't been, Chim in Marina Bay Sands is marvellous. So thank you, David, for joining us. We're going to have a chat about kind of the changing environment for chefs. Thomas Zacharias has flown in from Mumbai, so huge thanks for crossing the ocean there to come and join us. Thomas is executive chef of the Bombay Canteen in Mumbai, and was spotted very early on in his career and was sent to the Culinary Institute of America, the CIA, where he one of the best schools, or if not the best school in the world, I think, culinary school. Left there and went to work in Le Bernardin, which is a three Michelin starred restaurant in New York, and then came back to Mumbai and opened the Bombay Canteen. And we're going to talk about kind of his journey. Thomas has, amongst other things, a huge following on Twitter, and we're going to have a chat about how he's kind of interacting with Twitter and the opportunities that presents. And we have to thank Jenny on his left for introducing us to Thomas. Jenny Seeger is the head of entertainment at Twitter across Asia and oversees Twitter's content partnerships in Japan, Australia, India, and Southeast Asia. So a small portfolio there of countries to look after. And is responsible for campaigns with music artists, record labels, film companies, TV networks. And we're going to have a chat about how Twitter are sort of embracing the food space and doing things there. On Jenny's left is Lynn Ng, who spent 15 years at Discovery Networks, I think, if that's right. I was stalking your LinkedIn, so I think I got that right. Where she's currently Director of Content Strategy and Acquisition across Asia. And we're going to have a chat about how the Discovery Channel are also looking at food as a content pillar. And finally, at the end, Debbie Goldingham, who's Head of Marketing for Southeast Asia at MasterCard and is responsible for developing and managing MasterCard's marketing strategy across the region. And we're going to have a really good chat about MasterCard, one of the forerunners of brands working in the food space, and have a chat about what's going on there. So let's kick it off. Jenny, I'm going to throw a question to you first. In many ways, you're the perfect person for this panel. Your career has, you've been at MTV, you worked on the NFL Super Bowl, one of the biggest sporting events in the world with Pepsi. You've been at TV networks doing reality TV. You're now at Twitter. You've been doing sport, music, and TV, and now food's becoming a thing, and the panel's about the rising popularity of food. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what's going on there at Twitter?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Twitter for about 3 years, and I think it's really been in the last year that we've really seen a difference in the food space on Twitter. Now it's quickly become one of the biggest topics that our new users are interested in. So when new users come to the platform, one of the most common terms that they search for is actually food and cooking. And we've also seen that they are saying that food and cooking in general is one of their top interests, so it's right after movies and music. So it's really moved up in the space in the last year or so, I'd say. And we're also just seeing really interesting things happen in the food space. It's not just about, posting pretty pictures of what you're cooking or what you're eating, but now it's become about the journey and the story behind the food. And Thomas is a really great example of that, where we're seeing chefs and food writers and just influencers in the food space doing things like live streaming when they're out buying ingredients, or taking users on a journey to their hometown where the dish was born. And we even saw some original content shows pop up. Like there was a show last year which was #foodtripping, and it was just 2 people in the US that were going out and searching for the best restaurants in the US, and every day they just live streamed where they were going, and they'd eat something, and that was nominated for a Shorty Award and a Webby Award. So we're just really seeing the content just take a massive jump on the platform, and the creativity behind it, and again, that whole journey and the whole story behind it.
Yeah. And Debbie, you're also perfect for this panel. MasterCard has a long history doing sports and music, Champions League, golf, tennis. Huge presence in music, the MasterCard Brits, the Grammys, priceless music moments for years and years and years, and now, and not really now, for the last few years, food's really become a space that you're doing some great work in. Can you maybe give us a bit of background on what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And part of the strategy around the different sports and music is that people, whatever their passions are, whatever they're at home, they're going to do it when they travel. And what we've seen, whether they're playing football at home and then they're going to UEFA League, Champions League when they're travelling, it's a very similar proposition in the sense of if you're a foodie at home, you're going to be a foodie when you travel. And we started to see fantastic growth. And I mean, even over the last 2 years, we've seen a 200% growth in fine dining spend, not only at home, but also when people travel. So we're starting to see that it's those, not going to call them celebrity chefs, but culinary personalities, and the brand and the people behind the food is what's now appealing to people, actually increasing their fine dining experiences. And just picking up on what Jenny said, a lot of what we built around our Priceless Cities program has been working with the chefs that are going from farm to table. So it's the chefs that are actually growing the produce, working with the local farmers in the community, and then you're actually having that fine dining experience at night. So it's actually the journey and the story behind the food that's actually becoming more and more of a story for us and creating experiences for cardholders.
And you talk about chefs there. Chefs are at the heart of course, everything that's happening. And David, I'm going to ask you first in your career. What's your reflection on the changing status of chefs in the world, and what's your kind of view about how that is evolving at the moment?
I guess it astounds me the status now that cooks have, or chefs have. I prefer to call them cooks actually, because when I first started it was a trade. My parents were horrified, dismayed, and lamented the fact that I wanted to go into the kitchen because they thought it was a waste of a decent education. Well, possibly right, but they themselves, if they were alive, would be astounded to see the status of chefs now and their star-like celebrity that flits and glitters on the stage and on screens and on Twitter and in Instagram. It's an extraordinary development, and I'm not sure necessarily whether it's a healthy thing, though. Because it does mean that the cooks forget the very craft that has made them the talent and the coveted celebrities that they have become.
Do you think, though, I mean, a lot of the chefs that I talk to, running a restaurant is A, hard work, B, the margins are unpredictable and thin at best of time.
Oh, it's a cruel and brutish business. If you look at the kitchen itself, it's hard work. It's physical work, it's demanding work, it requires lots of hours in a constrained space with lots of heat and lots of action. It can be immensely satisfying as well, I hasten to add. It's when you have a wonderful service, when you have that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, it overcomes all the difficulties that are inherent within that difficult workspace. Running a restaurant, which is a different set of skills, is also just as difficult because the margins are so brittle, so slender, so slight that any mistake, whether it be a no-show, sending back of food, comps, or any slight accident, can mean the difference between making a profit that night and not. Most well-run restaurants can manage a profit margin of about 4 to 7%. Which is an absurdly low turnover or profit for the turnover that many restaurants have. And that's because there are so many staff involved and so many sources of ingredients, there are so many costs involved that as a manager you have to be able to oversee and control. So it is a juggling act. In the kitchen it's a smuggling act, in the office it's one of juggling. And that it's a very rare skill set that can combine the two.
Like other creators, actors, sports people, musicians,
buffoons, I think, and accidental managers.
But there's a opportunity now that maybe wasn't there 20, 10, even 5 years ago for hard-working cooks to have other sources of income and have other.
Look, absolutely. The horizons, the prospects become so diverse now. When I first started, it was cooking was cooking, a cook was a cook, and that's all they did, apart from clean a stove and perhaps have a beer after work. And
a couple of beers, I heard.
I'm sure you will. But now there are so many other opportunities, which can often mean that the cook themselves forgets the very core of their craft as they start to wander into the ancillary avenues that their career can present. This includes television, it includes book writing, it includes sponsorship, and so on and so forth. And very often now you'll find that people will get into the career in order to achieve those ancillary goals, as opposed to that central one that was once so principal, so prime, so important, and so crucial, and that is cooking.
Thomas, we were talking yesterday about when you started out, becoming a cook wasn't considered, and by your mum, the most important person as a good avenue. Your mum wanted to be a doctor, and you followed your passion. How do you think that perception has changed now back in India? And most importantly, is your mum now very proud of what you've achieved?
In fact, just about half an hour ago, she just sent me a text saying, "I'm so proud of you." Yes, when I decided to become a chef about 15 years ago, it wasn't a career that was even on people's radars, let alone a great option. In India especially, you either became a doctor or an engineer, and that has changed drastically. I think, like you said, food is universal and everyone, for the most part, is passionate about food, but I guess what has changed over the last decade or so is that food media has kind of taken the notion of chefs and demystified them and gotten them to people's homes, and in a way gotten people to recognize the hard work that goes into becoming a chef.
Can I ask a question? Yes. Demystified or deified?
Bit of both. I mean,
bit of both. And in a way, what has happened today is, especially avenues like social media have given chefs a voice to be able to tell their stories to the larger public. For the longest time, the influence of a chef was limited to what is on the table, which wasn't a bad thing. But for me as a chef, I want to be able to be a storyteller for the restaurant as well and echo the restaurant's philosophy. And that's what these platforms are letting me do.
Social media has been the secret ingredient. I mean, you had musicians and actors before. They had their avenues to get their creativity. At the end of the day, you're creators of things that we love. And before social media, the joy that people had in your restaurant was the satisfaction that you got from your craft. And now social media is giving you that platform to share it.
Yeah, I think what Derek from the previous panel said holds true for food as well, is that authentic storytelling helps create a community of engaged customers. And that's kind of what social media allows you to do.
Lynn, talking about content and this type of content that now food is allowing people to explore and enjoy. We spoke yesterday about the shift that you see in aspirational long-form content and inspirational short-form content. That was quite an interesting kind of distinction there. Can you maybe enlighten us a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. I think, for us in Discovery, across Asia, we've had years of experience of, having long-form food video content on linear television. We know what works. And, what works tends to be things which are more aspirational. So it leaves the viewers with a feeling of, wow, I wish I could do that. So it's amazing cakes. It's, top culinary talent like Nigella Lawson, Jamie Oliver, David Thompson. We have your show on the channel. And yeah, so, the feeling, the takeaway is a wow feeling. Whereas I find that for short form food content, which lives on digital mainly right now, it is more an inspirational feeling. It's, it's a sense of, hey, I can do that, and that's from all the popularity of all the tasty videos or the taste-made videos. I think so for us as a content provider, it's been interesting, and I think there's a lot of learnings, and we are trying to figure out, in this new kind of space, how can we translate our experience into, short, mid-length food content on digital. And I think a sweet spot might be in that mid-length content. So you're looking at 10, 15-minute videos where then, you can still have the storytelling, aspirational angle, but, it's short enough to have snacky takeaways.
This is a really simple question, but what works about food content? Why have shows like MasterChef and My Kitchen Rules become so ubiquitous and successful? And what's the secret ingredient there? What do you think? What's all our views on that?
I think food is a necessity, but which, can be so much more. I think, there is a fascination. And being in this part of the world, you can get such diverse, array of cuisines and at, pretty affordable price points as well. So, it's an accessibility thing, I think.
And so talking about this part of the world, I think we have, I'm going to cut to the slide that I think we've got that Branded did a poll with YouGov about food, and you can see up there that food and the sort of interest in food is increasing, especially in this region. And I think you were talking about in Lynn in Asia, Discovery Network over indexes in food. Is that?
I mean, just internally, we have like 4 to 5 subgenres on food. That's how much it matters to us as one of the core content pillars. And consumer insights have also shown that, food is not just a lifestyle interest. So it's not just people who are interested in lifestyle topics who like food. It over-indexes amongst factual viewers as well. So people who like science and technology, they like food. Yeah, so, and, for us, we kind of classify them in different buckets. There is like travel cuisine, which does very well for us. There is food competition, things like MasterChef. There are, what else is there? Food cookery. So it's kind of what we call stand and stir, where you stand and, you cook. And food business, which is, behind the scenes of restaurants and bake shops. So the fact that, we kind of dissect it to that level, it is a huge area of content for us.
And Jenny, what are you seeing? What's working on your on Twitter? Food Flock is a big thing now. Could maybe tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, the food flock, as Thomas was saying before, I think what social media can do for food is helping you be discovered outside of your own market in your own country. And I think Twitter specifically is great for that because we are such a live global platform and you don't actually need to have an account to consume that information. So you can be a logged out user who just maybe searches for, say, Thomas, and up comes his name, and then you're led to his content on the platform. So the food flock was something, a hashtag that was created on Twitter that started and is used by chefs all over the world and food writers and kind of top quality food content producers, and it groups together that conversation. So they might tweet a video and then hashtag it food flock, and food fanatics all over the world know that if they search that hashtag, they can find it. So we're adding every day to that kind of food council on Twitter. So that is really popular. But I think that in general, whether you're talking about music or food, the rules are kind of the same. It's about the authenticity and it's about the high quality content. So it doesn't matter what the topic there is, but when you think about music and food, they're both relatable around the world, and they're both topics that everyday people feel extremely passionate about, and it just goes back to that authenticity and that top quality.
It's fair to say that food actually has the greatest capacity to be loved universally. Music's a very regional thing, and sport can be a very tribal thing, but you can be anywhere in the world and appreciate. Are you finding more and more people coming to your restaurants from farther afield?
I think, first of all, eating is absolutely essential, but then what you do have is the added emotional impact and effect of enjoying the food, either visually, through Discovery Television, for instance, with the almost porn-like, the luster and the vividness and the thing that gives savour, or in the written word, or on Twitter, which is far more brief and to the point, or on Instagram, which is a snapshot of exactly what you do on Discovery's channel. So there are all these avenues that add garnish, add luster, and add that longing for of eating.
A primal experience.
Well, indeed, eating itself is so essential that there is that primal atavist urge to consume. And I find in a restaurant, for instance, you excite one of two emotions with people in a restaurant. They either absolutely love it, and there's a test that I always see, and it's when somebody eats, that nod when they have that first taste. And Thomas, you might have seen it as well. I sometimes peer around a corner, and you look at a guest, and they'll eat something, and all of a sudden there'll be a nod, and it's an unconscious nod, and yet you'll know that that's how people actually do it. And it's an old-fashioned way, but it's one that you know is the sincerest way to gauge whether they do it. But the other thing that is that's astounding about guests in a restaurant is when they're thwarted or upset, they become so indignant that distorts the situation beyond belief. And I think that's because it is such a primal urge that one becomes almost irrational in the love of it, the lust for it, the desire for it, the listening to it, the tweeting of it, and the consumption of it too.
Thomas, how are you seeing the rising changes that are going on, and are people coming to Bombay Canteen from further afield than before? And is your Twitter account helping drive that, and is that a part of your kind of environment?
I think I should lay a premise to the restaurant itself. So the Bombay Canteen is essentially a super approachable restaurant that does regional Indian food, but also uses a lot of local and seasonal produce. Now, to everyone sitting here, that might just seem like any other concept across the world, right? But in India, that's still a very alien philosophy, because people in India are still going gaga over Brussels sprouts and asparagus, as opposed to the vegetables in the local market. So we have guests from our city who come to our restaurant and don't know the vegetables we're serving, but they're from next door. And that's why I keep talking about storytelling, because I think one, as chefs, it's our responsibility to not just have a point of view, but kind of try and do something about it. And what we're trying to do at the Bombay Canteen is to kind of get people more excited about Indian food, get Indians excited about Indian food.
It's an astonishing situation that as somebody who's from Australia, that's cooking in Bangkok, that travels the world, has a few restaurants all over the place, the awareness of most of the customers that come through my doors is often quite irritating, so exacting it might be. Whereas I'm astonished that in India there's not yet that awareness. It must be a struggle. So I guess you do need as many platforms as possible. as well as a conch in order to knock some sense into them, to acquaint the guests with what should be something that they grew up with.
Exactly, and we do it subtly, and like you rightly said, sorry?
Have you ever tried a brick as well?
like you rightly said, first and foremost, our main goal is to make the food we serve at the restaurant delicious, right? And in fact, I got into cooking, like craving for that same reaction from the guest, because I saw my grandmother make people so happy through her food, and that's what got me into cooking. And for us, the first and foremost responsibility is to make sure our guests have a great experience. But beyond that, the larger philosophy is to kind of pull people back to their roots in India.
Yeah, and at the heart of it all, it's an experience. And
absolutely.
There's the term experience economy is banded around now, and travel is also an experience. Debbie, I want to talk about this other whole area called destination dining. People now are planning holidays around restaurants that they want to go to, and the world's 50 best, and chef's tables changed that a bit, and people are now... What are you seeing? I mean, let's get some numbers going maybe. What are you seeing in terms of people spending more on...
Yeah, I mean, well, we've seen basically in terms of cross-border, we've seen about 120% increase in fine dining across Southeast Asia alone. And that's people coming to that. I think the really interesting thing is the fastest growth is it's 1 in 3 millennials are actually putting their hand up, and they will eat out at a fine dining restaurant once a month. So in terms of the shared economy and the experience economy, these are the individuals that are literally paving the way and actually the ones spending the money to be able to share it on any of the social networks. So their experiences are meeting the chef, being able to experience that and being able to tell a story behind their experience, which is why we're seeing a lot of the growth coming from millennials. We're also doing a lot of things where, you know, we're challenging the chefs. We're putting 2 different chefs on a boat off Sentosa. We've just finished up, actually haven't finished up, we're halfway through a campaign with Burnt Ends where David's bringing in, the chef there is actually bringing in his network where we're pairing up with a chef from other restaurants around the world and creating these unique experiences where there's a shared kitchen and card holders get to book out and actually have that experience with the 2 chefs, of which is literally the chefs are given 12 hours, they arrive in the country and they're literally tasked with finding the ingredients in Singapore and coming up with the menu that night. So it's a one-off menu between the 2 of them.
You're doing things that we were doing 10 years ago with artists and musicians. We're trying to...
Exactly,
okay,
exactly.
Normally you go to a gig, band plays on the stage, yep, that's great, but brands need to make things that are kind of different and interesting and engaging, and that's happening now in the food space, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's, you know, I think one of the challenges for us as a mass market brand is a lot of people will get a bit nervous saying, oh, is that a bit too niche? Is that a bit too, you know, we're a mass market brand. But the phenomenal things is that, you know, everybody's responsive to this. We're getting sellout, we're getting waiting lists, and, you know, we're getting that repeat usage where people are now actually saying this is the experience brand that I want to be part of.
David, I'm going to ask, before you, I think you were, you quickly brushed off an accolade I threw at you in these lists that are going around now, the world's 50 best.
And I should do it again.
I want to ask, do you find that those lists are helpful to your business? Do you think they're superficial and should be discarded?
I have mixed emotions, mixed feelings about them, mixed ideas about them. Look, there is no question that they are beneficial to a business. There is absolutely no question whatsoever, but I do find that as a cook and as somebody in the industry, working with my colleagues in the industry, I find the idea of ranking rather repulsive and also nonsensical, because it's like comparing apples to
and it's a very personal experience.
What it is, but also where you can the quality of one restaurant against another, when they have different aspirations, they have different goals, they have different levels of standards of cooking, they have different cuisines, means that they're almost incomparable. A good restaurant, though, is good unto itself, and uniquely so. And that is the magic of a good restaurant, and that's why it's so artisanal and almost impossible to create in an industrial way. Where that's why you have the rise of the brands, but there's a certain soullessness about brands that individual restaurants run by owners who are there have. It's inescapable, I have to say. Whereas, what was I saying? I've now lost my train of thought.
Talking about lists, and I think...
So on the list, you'll find that the high-ranking places all are quite unique unto themselves. But the difference between, say, number 1 and number 20 is minuscule.
Yeah.
It's a matter of voting and of an opinion, which has nothing to do with quality. And I think, for instance, I know that you've mentioned the 50 best. That's a very interesting idea because it's a snapshot of restaurants and what's happening in the restaurant world at the moment, as opposed to the more august, say, Michelin Guide, which has opened up in Singapore 2 years ago with some controversy, which has now begun to
Why did it take so long for Michelin to open here in Singapore, do you think?
Oh, it's been a jump for the French to go from
the snobbery of the French.
Well, no, just
gastronomic.
No, I wouldn't call it snobbery. I would just say the fact that it is ensconced in France and in Europe. It then only went over to Britain in the 1980s. I mean, mind you,
No, it shouldn't be there really in Britain, should it?
Well, they had no need to go there before the 1980s, shall we say. But and then it jumped across to Japan. It went to Hong Kong. It's gone to Singapore. So it is beginning to spread its wings. But the criteria that are used in order to get into the Michelin Guide are quite different and far more stated and consistent than, say, the popularity contest that the 50 best might be, with its currency, its excitement and its thrill.
It has, in a bigger way, to these lists, we're seeing that there's a positive effect because it's raising the appreciation of the hard work that goes into running a restaurant. That are link all these things together, where
it's a mixed blessing, because whilst it may indeed create a greater awareness, it also creates an appreciation or a belief that there are actually rankings and that one restaurant is better than another, where most of them are quite close when it comes to those upper rankings of lists.
Thomas, I'm going to have a quick chat about a couple of things in anomalies in India, but then sort of lead to a broader subject. I'm just looking at the clock. We've only got a little bit of time left. Things like MasterChef Australia, you were saying, is huge in India, which is really interesting because that's an Australian program it's bigger than MasterChef India, which is...
It is. And I think that show single-handedly has gotten people in India at least a lot more excited about food and restaurants. And right now, restaurants and food concepts are opening up at an unimaginable scale in India.
And do you think, are we seeing food content now translate between markets on Twitter, on your network, easier than other forms of content?
I mean, I think that the kind of inspirational videos that Lynn was talking about from publishers like Tastemade, BuzzFeed, the quick little recipe snippets, have certainly translate across regions everywhere. And those little 1.5 or 2 minute videos, I mean, you can't help but watch them and then go, I'm going to go try to make that cake. Or
we all think we can do that.
Everybody thinks they can do it, and then you get the Pinterest fail picture later. But I mean, I definitely think that it is a unique position where it translates all over the world. You don't have to speak the language. You just watch the video, look at the food, and then you're off and running.
Yeah. I'm going to end on a lofty subject. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I think my view is food and cooks and chefs play a much more important role in the future of the planet now, with issues like overpopulation and sustainability, and educating people on seasonality and not expecting crops to be flown around the world because you want them in the supermarket. Do you see that? Do you feel that sense of responsibility? And should we, as people, as part of the ecosystem, kind of acknowledge that? We were talking about world hunger earlier, and food is an essential part of our existence, and it's now treated accordingly.
Without being overly didactic, it's very important for one to operate in a moral and ethical way. And if that encourages other people to actually consider their own actions, that's a very good thing indeed. So, of course, you want to make sure that what you buy is sustainable, is seasonal. But that's because it's better. It tastes better, but also it sits better when it comes to one's conscience.
I mean, that's only become really a thing that we're aware of as consumers recently, and chefs are, and the content that's being produced and the work that brands are doing in this space is helping to kind of change the way we see a very fundamental thing about living, right?
Yeah, I think, if you set out to educate, then, you'll be making content that probably will be quite preachy and you're shoving it down people's throats. But I think if we focus on kind of what David's touched on, which is, the lists, right? The idea is that food experiences it's very subjective. So if you acknowledge the subjectivity and, like what Thomas said about stories, that you tell stories from around the world to show why these things matter, I think it's a much better way of getting the message across.
Yes, because you don't want to actually shove that message down a person's throat. What you want them to do is consume the food and enjoy it first.
It has this ability to be either something we just enjoy and have a great night out with friends. It can be a way of helping to communicate other messages, or it can be something really grand, like helping to save communities and to...
At the very least, if it breeds contentment, then it's a job well done. If it can lead to further understanding of how to use ingredients or source ingredients or dispose of ingredients, well, that's very good indeed too. It's an added boon.
Yeah. Well, we've got a red dot on our screen now, so I think that's time to wrap, unfortunately. We got time for any questions, if anyone has any, or I'm getting a squint. Is any questions out there? No? Well, oh, there you go. Someone give this gentleman a microphone. Go for it.
Faster. Just a question for very short content, like 3 to 5 minutes. What do you guys suggest we put for something that's video about food? What are you guys looking for, or what do you see has worked in that short video space?
Maybe Lynn and Jenny can answer that one.
I think, like I was saying before, it doesn't matter if you're talking about food or music or sports or whatever it is. It's all, again, about the authenticity and the quality of that content. So, for Thomas, authenticity might be the local ingredients. And for David, that might mean something completely different. So you just need to figure out what is that story that you're trying to tell and what is that voice, and your authentic voice, regardless of what platform you're using. And then just making sure that the content is actually good quality content.
I think, food video content starts off inherently handicapped, because if you think about what people love most about food is how it smells and how it tastes. And with food video, you can't smell and you can't taste, right? So it's kind of like Conor McGregor boxing. But then, which means that you then have to over-deliver on other senses, which means that, visually it has to look awesome as hell. The audio has to be spot on. And I think, importantly, you need to find a unique angle to tell the story.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone to our panel.
Yes.
And yeah.
Thank you.